Have you ever wondered what would happen if the person who destroyed your life discovered they had just made the biggest mistake of their existence? What if the woman they threw away like garbage was actually worth more than everything they ever dreamed of having? Well, buckle up because this story is about to show you exactly what happens when karma decides to write the ultimate plot twist. I'm talking about betrayal so deep it cuts to the bone, secrets so massive they reshape entire lives, and revenge so perfectly orchestrated that it feels like divine justice. If you're ready for a story that will make you believe in the power of truth, the beauty of genuine love, and the absolute certainty that what goes around comes around, then make sure you hit that like button right now, because this one is going to be unforgettable. Let me introduce you to Sarah Mitchell, a 28-year-old woman whose life was about to become a masterclass in how quickly everything you think you know can crumble. For 3 years, Sarah had been married to David Matthews, a man she thought she knew inside and out. They lived in a modest apartment in the suburbs, and while money was always tight, Sarah believed they were building something real together. Sarah worked as a freelance graphic designer, putting in long hours to help pay their bills while David worked at a mid-level marketing firm. She handled most of the household responsibilities, cooked their meals, and still managed to put aside a little money each month from her earnings. She wasn't just being a supportive wife. She was being the kind of partner who puts the relationship above everything else. But David had been growing distant over the past 6 months. He started working late more often, became secretive about his phone, and seemed irritated by the smallest things Sarah did. When she tried to talk to him about it, he brushed her off with excuses about work stress and financial pressure. What Sarah didn't know was that David had been having an affair with his boss, Victoria Sterling, a wealthy woman in her mid-30s who owned a chain of high-end boutiques. Victoria represented everything David thought he wanted: money, status, and the kind of lifestyle he felt he deserved. The betrayal came to light on a Tuesday evening that started like any other. Sarah had prepared David's favorite dinner, hoping to create a moment for them to reconnect. She had even bought a small bottle of wine with money she had been saving for a new computer for her design work. David came home late, as usual, but this time he had a different energy about him. He seemed almost excited. Sarah felt a flutter of hope that maybe he was finally ready to work on their relationship. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, but his tone wasn't the gentle one she had hoped for. "Of course," she replied, sitting down. The plates she had been arranging. "I made your favorite, that pasta dish with the herb sauce you love." David didn't even look at the food. "I'm leaving you." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She actually took a step back, her hand gripping the edge of the counter. "What?" "I'm leaving you," he repeated. And now she could see something in his eyes she had never seen before, a cold determination that made him look like a stranger. "I found someone else, someone who can give me the life I actually want." Sarah's mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. "David, I don't understand. We can work through whatever problems we're having. We can get counseling. There's nothing to work through," he interrupted. "I'm not happy, Sarah. I haven't been happy for a long time. You're holding me back." "Holding you back?" Sarah's voice cracked. "How am I holding you back? I've supported your career. I've taken care of our home. You've kept me trapped in this mediocre life." David's voice rose, and for the first time in their marriage, Sarah felt genuinely afraid of him. "Look around, Sarah. Look at this place. Look at how we live. I'm 30 years old, and what do I have to show for it? A tiny apartment, a job that barely pays the bills, and a wife who thinks a homemade dinner is some kind of special occasion." Each word was like a dagger. Sarah felt her legs go weak, and she had to sit down on one of their second-hand kitchen chairs. "David, I know money's been tight, but we're building something together. We're building nothing," he shouted. "I'm done building nothing. Victoria can give me the life I deserve. She has money, she has connections, she has everything you could never provide. Victoria. So there was another woman. Sarah felt something inside her chest just break. How long? She whispered. 6 months, David said. And he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. And before you ask, yes, I love her. I love her in a way I never loved you. Sarah stared at him. This man she had shared a bed with for 3 years. This man she had trusted with her heart, her body, her future. You never loved me. I thought I did, he said with a shrug that was so casual it was almost obscene. But that was before I knew what real love could feel like. Before I knew what it was like to be with someone who could actually enhance my life instead of just existing in it. The cruelty of his words took Sarah's breath away. She had given this man everything she had, and he was telling her it wasn't. Just not enough. It was actually dragging him down. I want you out by the end of the week, David continued, and now his voice was businesslike, as if he was discussing a work project. The lease is in my name, so you'll need to find somewhere else to go. I'll pay for the divorce lawyer, since I'm the one who wants it. Where am I supposed to go? Sarah asked, and she hated how small her voice sounded. That's not my problem. Anymore, David said. Maybe you can stay with your mom for a while. Figure things out. You're smart, you'll land on your feet. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and realized she was seeing the real David Matthews for the first time. Not the man who had courted her with flowers and promises. Not the man who had whispered sweet words during their wedding ceremony. But the man who could discard 3 years of marriage like it was nothing more than an inconvenience. I gave you everything, she said quietly. You gave me what you had, David replied. It just wasn't enough. And with that, he walked out of their apartment, leaving Sarah sitting alone at the kitchen table with a home-cooked meal growing cold and a future that had just evaporated into nothing. Sarah sat there for a long time, staring at the 2 plates of food she had prepared with such hope just an hour before. The wine she had bought was still unopened. The candles she had lit were still flickering. And the life she thought she was living was revealed to be nothing more than an illusion. She had never felt more alone in her entire life. The next morning, Sarah woke up on the couch, still wearing the clothes from the night before. For just a moment, in that hazy space between sleep and waking, she forgot what had happened. Then reality crashed back down on her like a ton of bricks. David was gone. Their marriage was over. And she had less than a week to figure out how to rebuild her entire life. Sarah's first instinct was to call her mother, but she hesitated with her phone in her hand. How do you tell your mother that your marriage, the marriage she had been so proud of, the marriage she had helped plan and celebrate, was over because your husband decided you weren't good enough? Instead, Sarah made herself a cup of coffee, with shaking hands, and tried to think practically. She needed to find somewhere to live. She needed to figure out her finances. And she needed to somehow continue working while her world was falling apart. The apartment felt different now, like a place that had never really been hers. She noticed how few of the decorations were actually hers, how most of the furniture had been chosen by David or inherited from his family. She had been living in his life, not building one of her own. Around noon, David came back to collect some of his things. He moved through the apartment with the efficiency of someone who just wanted to get an unpleasant task over with. He barely looked at Sarah, who was sitting at her computer trying to focus on a design project. I'll need the car, he said, not looking up from the closet where he was packing his suits. What? Sarah looked up from her laptop. David, I need the car to get to client meetings. The car is in my name, he said matter-of-factly. Besides, Victoria is getting me a new one. A BMW. She says I deserve something better than that old Honda. Sarah felt a surge of anger so intense it surprised her. That old Honda that I helped pay for? That old Honda that I've been maintaining and insuring for 3 years? Legally. It's mine, David said, finally looking at her. Look, Sarah, I'm trying to be fair here. I'm paying for the divorce. I'm giving you time to find a new place. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Fair? Sarah stood up, her laptop forgotten. You think any of this is fair? You think walking out on our marriage for another woman is fair? You think taking the car I helped pay for is fair? I think you're being emotional, David said, and his tone was so condescending that Sarah wanted to throw something at him. This is just how divorce works. Assets get divided, and most of the assets are mine, because I supported your career. Sarah shouted, because I took freelance work so you could focus on climbing the corporate ladder, because I believed we were building something together. And I'm grateful for that, David said, but his voice was cold. But gratitude doesn't change the legal facts. The lease is in my name, the car is in my name, and most of the savings came from my salary. Sarah stared at him, realizing that he had been planning this. The way he talked about assets and legal facts, this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He had been thinking about how to leave her with as little as possible. You're really going to take everything, she said quietly. I'm taking what's mine, David corrected. You can keep your computer, your clothes, your design equipment. That's more than fair. Sarah looked around the apartment, seeing it with new eyes. The couch she had picked out and saved for months to buy, technically purchased with David's credit card. The kitchen table where they had shared thousands of meals, a gift from David's parents. Even the bed they had shared was something David had owned before their marriage. She had been living in David's life, and now he was erasing her from it completely. I need at least 2 weeks to find a place, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. 1 week? David replied. Victoria wants to have dinner here next Saturday. She's curious about the place. The casual cruelty of that statement hit Sarah like a slap. He was going to bring his mistress to the apartment where he had lived with his wife. He was going to let Victoria see the life he was discarding. You're going to bring her here? Sarah asked, and she couldn't keep the hurt out of her voice. It's my apartment, David said with a shrug, and she's going to be my wife soon. Your wife? Sarah felt the room spin. You're going to marry her? We're thinking about it, David said, and he actually smiled. She's already talked about having a big wedding, the kind of wedding she deserves. The implication was clear, the kind of wedding Sarah had never deserved. Their own wedding had been small and simple, held in Sarah's childhood church with a reception in the community center. At the time, Sarah had thought it was perfect because it was about their love, not about show. Now she realized David had been ashamed of it. I see, Sarah said quietly. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, David said, missing the complete devastation in her voice. I know this is hard, but it's better for both of us in the long run. You'll find someone who's more compatible with your lifestyle. Compatible with her lifestyle. As if her lifestyle was something shameful, something less than what she deserved. After David left with 2 suitcases full of his things, Sarah sat in the apartment that was no longer her home and tried to make a plan. She had about $3,000 in her personal savings account, money she had been setting aside for a surprise vacation for her and David's 4th wedding anniversary. She had her design equipment and her client list. She had her car for another few days. That was it. That was what 3 years of marriage had left her with. Sarah spent the rest of the day looking for apartments she could afford on her regular freelance income. The options were depressing. Small studios in rough neighborhoods, room shares with strangers, or places so far from the city that she spent hours commuting to client meetings. By evening, she was exhausted and more discouraged than she had ever been in her life. She had always been the kind of person who could figure things out, who could make a plan and execute it, but this felt impossible. She was starting from zero, and zero felt like a very deep hole. That night, Sarah's mother called. Hi, sweetheart. Her mom's cheerful voice came through the phone. I was just thinking about you and David. How are you 2 doing? Sarah started crying before she could stop herself. Sarah? Honey, what's wrong? Mom, Sarah managed to choke. Out. David left me. There was a long pause. What do you mean, left you? He's having an affair. Sarah said, and saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. He's leaving me for another woman, someone with money. Oh, honey, her mother said, and Sarah could hear the heartbreak in her voice. Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do, Mom, Sarah said, and she felt like a child again. I don't know where to go or how to start over. I thought we were happy. I thought we were building a life together. Come home, her mother said immediately. Come home right now. We'll figure this out together. But Sarah knew she couldn't go home. Her mother lived in a small town 3 hours away, and Sarah's entire client base was in the city. Going home would mean starting over completely, and she wasn't ready to give up everything she had worked for. I can't, Mom, Sarah said. My work is here. My life is here. Your life just walked out on you, her mother said gently. Sometimes, starting over means going back to the beginning. Sarah knew her mother was right, but she also knew she wasn't ready to admit defeat. Not yet. I'm going to try to make it work here, Sarah said. I need to prove to myself that I can do this. Okay, her mother said, and Sarah could hear the worry in her voice. But promise me you'll call if you need anything. Anything at all. I promise, Sarah said after she hung up. Sarah sat in the quiet apartment and made herself a promise. She was going to survive this. She was going to find a way to rebuild her life. And she was going to do it without David Matthews. She had no idea that within a few months, she would discover that she had never needed David at all. In fact, she was about to learn that she had always been capable of far more than she had ever imagined. The next week was a blur of apartment hunting, packing, and trying to maintain some semblance of professional composure while her personal life crumbled. Sarah found a small studio apartment in a neighborhood that was safe but far from trendy. The rent was more than she wanted to pay, but it was the best she could do on short notice. Move-in day was particularly brutal. Sarah had hired a small truck and enlisted the help of her friend Maya, the only person she had told about the divorce. Maya was furious on Sarah's behalf, which was both comforting and exhausting. I never liked him, Maya said as they carried boxes down the stairs. He always acted like he was doing you a favor by being with you. That's not true, Sarah said automatically, then stopped. Actually, maybe it is true. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. You saw what you wanted to see, Maya said gently. You saw the potential for the life you wanted, not the reality of the life you had. As they loaded the last of Sarah's belongings into the truck, David appeared in the doorway. He looked uncomfortable, which was the first time Sarah had seen him show any emotion other than cold determination since the night he left. I wanted to say goodbye, he said, but he didn't step outside. Goodbye, Sarah said simply. And I wanted to give you this. He held out an envelope. It's a little extra money to help you get settled. I know this hasn't been easy. Sarah stared at the envelope. Part of her wanted to throw it back at him and tell him to keep his guilt money. But the practical part of her, the part that had been calculating and recalculating her budget for days, knew she needed every dollar she could get. Thank you, she said, taking the envelope without looking inside. Sarah, David said, and for a moment he sounded like the man she had married. I hope you know this isn't about you not being good enough. We just ... we want different things. No, Sarah said quietly. You want different things. I wanted the life we had. I wanted you. David looked away. I hope you find someone who can give you what you deserve. I hope you're happy, Sarah said, and she meant it. Not because she forgave him, but because she was too tired to hate him anymore. After David went back inside, Maya helped Sarah drive the truck to her new apartment. The studio was tiny, just one room with a small kitchen alcove and a bathroom that barely fit a shower. But it was hers, and that counted for something. It's cozy, Maya said, trying to be positive as they surveyed the space. It's depressing, Sarah said, but she managed a weak smile. But it's mine. The next few months were the hardest of Sarah's life. Her freelance income was irregular, and she had to take on projects she would have turned down before, logos for sketchy businesses, websites for companies that couldn't pay well, any work that would keep her afloat. She ate a lot of ramen, noodles, and peanut butter sandwiches. She walked instead of taking the bus to save money. She canceled her gym membership, her streaming subscriptions, and every other expense that wasn't absolutely necessary. But slowly, gradually, Sarah began to realize something. She was surviving. More than that, she was functioning. She was paying her bills, meeting her deadlines, and taking care of herself. She was doing everything she had done when she was married, just with less money and more stress. The revelation came one evening when she was working late on a particularly challenging project. She had been struggling with a design concept for hours, and finally, around midnight, she had a breakthrough. The solution was elegant and creative, and she knew the client would love it. As she saved the file, Sarah realized that she felt proud, not just of the design, but of herself. She was making it on her own. She was building something, slowly but surely, and she was doing it entirely through her own efforts. That night, Sarah called her mother. "Hi, sweetheart," her mom answered. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Sarah said, and she realized she meant it. "Actually, I'm better than okay. I'm learning things about myself." "What kind of things?" "I'm stronger than I thought I was," Sarah said. "I'm more capable than I gave myself credit for. I spent so much energy trying to be the perfect wife that I forgot to be me." "You were always strong," her mother said. "You just forgot for a while." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but I'm remembering now." Over the next few weeks, Sarah began to notice other changes in herself. She was more decisive about her work, more willing to push back when clients made unreasonable demands. She was dressing differently, still professionally, but with more personality. She was exploring parts of the city she had never seen before, trying restaurants she had never been to, reading books she had never had time for when she was focused on maintaining a marriage. She was becoming herself again, but it was a stronger, more confident version of herself than she had ever been. One evening, as Sarah was walking home from a client meeting, she saw a familiar figure across the street. It was David, walking hand in hand with a woman who could only be Victoria. Sarah's first instinct was to duck into a store to avoid being seen. But something made her stand still and watch. Victoria was beautiful. There was no denying that. She was tall and elegant, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of clothes that whispered expensive rather than shouted it. She looked like she belonged in David's arm, like they were both playing the part of successful, attractive people. David looked good too. He was wearing a suit Sarah had never seen before, and his hair was styled differently. He looked like he was trying very hard to be the kind of man who belonged with Victoria. As Sarah watched them, she felt something unexpected. It wasn't jealousy or heartbreak. It was pity. David looked like he was performing, like he was constantly aware of how he appeared to others. Victoria looked like she was evaluating him, making sure he was worth her investment. They looked like two people who were very focused on looking successful together. But Sarah couldn't see any genuine joy or connection between them. For the first time since David had left her, Sarah felt grateful. Not grateful for the pain or the struggle, but grateful that she had been forced to discover who she really was without him. As she walked home to her tiny studio apartment, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Excitement. About the future. She didn't know what was coming next, but she knew she was strong enough to handle it. If someone had told her that evening that she was about to discover something that would change her life completely, she would have laughed. She had already been through the biggest change possible. She had lost everything and rebuilt herself from scratch. But life, as Sarah was about to learn, had much bigger plans for her than she could have ever imagined. It was a Tuesday morning. In late October, when Sarah's life changed forever. She was sitting at the small desk in her studio apartment, working on a logo design for a local bakery, when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize with a 212 area code. Hello? She answered, expecting it to be a potential client or maybe a telemarketer. Is this Sarah Mitchell? The voice was professional, female, with a slight accent. Sarah couldn't place. Yes, this is she. Miss Mitchell, my name is Elena Vasquez, and I'm a private investigator working for the law firm Morrison, Blake & Associates. I'm calling about a matter concerning your birth parents. Sarah felt the world tilt. I'm sorry, what? Your birth parents, Elena repeated gently. Are you free to talk, or would you prefer to schedule a time to meet in person? This is a conversation that might be better had face-to-face. Sarah's mind raced. She had been adopted as a baby, but her adoptive parents had always been open about it. They had told her that her birth mother was a young woman who couldn't take care of a baby, and that her birth father was unknown. Sarah had sometimes wondered about her biological family, but she had never actively searched for them. I don't understand, Sarah said. How did you find me? What's this about? Ms. Mitchell, would it be possible for you to come to our office this afternoon? I know this is sudden, but I have some information that I think you'll want to hear as soon as possible. There was something in Elena's voice that made Sarah's heart start racing. Is everything okay? Is someone hurt? No one is hurt, Elena said quickly, but this is about your inheritance. My inheritance? Sarah nearly dropped the phone. I don't understand. I don't have any inheritance. You do, Elena said gently, and it's substantial. Can you meet me at 2 p.m. today? I'm in Manhattan, but I can also come to you if that's easier. Sarah looked around her tiny studio apartment, then at her current client project, a $50 logo for a small business. I'll come to you, she said. 3 hours later, Sarah found herself in a gleaming office building in Midtown Manhattan, sitting across from Elena Vasquez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. On the desk between them was a thick folder that Elena had been referring to throughout their conversation. Sarah, Elena said, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, but I have documentation to prove everything I'm saying. Okay, Sarah said, gripping the arms of her chair. Your birth parents were Robert and Catherine Sterling. They were both killed in a car accident when you were 6 months old. Sarah's breath caught. Sterling? That's the same last name as Victoria Sterling, yes, Elena said, watching Sarah's face carefully. Victoria is your cousin. Sarah felt like she was in a dream. My cousin? But but she's been living off your inheritance for the past 28 years, Elena said bluntly. Your parents left everything to you, Sarah. But when they died, Victoria's father, your uncle, was named as the executor of the estate until you came of age. He was supposed to find you and turn everything over to you when you turned 18. But he didn't, Sarah said, though it came out more like a question. No, he didn't. He and Victoria have been living off the Sterling family fortune for nearly 3 decades. They've been collecting the income from your trust fund, using your inheritance to fund their lifestyle. When Victoria's father died 5 years ago, she took over managing the estate. She's been hoping you would never be found. Sarah stared at Elena, trying to process what she was hearing. How much money are we talking about? Elena opened the folder and pulled out a document. As of yesterday, your trust fund is worth approximately $2.3 billion. Sarah's vision went dark around the edges. I'm sorry, how much? $2.3 billion. Elena repeated. Your parents own Sterling Industries, which they founded in their 20s. It's now one of the largest private companies in the country. The business has been run by a board of directors, but you, as the heir, own controlling interests. Sarah put her head in her hands. This can't be real. It's real, Elena said gently. I have your birth certificate, your parents' will, documentation of the adoption, and a full accounting of the trust fund. I also have evidence that Victoria and her father deliberately concealed your existence from the other trustees. How did you find me? Sarah asked. We weren't looking for you, Elena. admitted, "We were investigating Victoria for possible fraud related to some business dealings. During our investigation, we discovered documents that proved the existence of an heir who should have inherited the estate decades ago. It took us 6 months to track you down." Sarah looked up at Elena. "Who hired you to investigate Victoria?" "The other board members of Sterling Industries. They've been suspicious of Victoria's management for years, but they didn't have proof of wrongdoing until now." "And David?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "David Matthews has no idea who Victoria really is," Elena said. "She's been presenting herself as a successful businesswoman, but she's essentially been living off stolen money for her entire adult life." Sarah started laughing, but it was the kind of laughter that was dangerously close to hysteria. "So, my husband left me for a woman who's been stealing my money?" "I'm afraid so," Elena said. "And Sarah, there's something else you need to know. Victoria is planning to marry David in 2 weeks. We believe she's doing this to protect herself legally. If she's married to him, it complicates any attempt to recover the assets." "She's marrying him to protect herself from me?" Sarah asked. "Partially, yes, but also because she's running out of time. The other board members are planning to take legal action against her. If she's married, she can claim spousal privilege and make it harder for us to investigate her fully." Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Somewhere down there, David was probably planning his wedding to Victoria, thinking he had found his ticket to the good life. Neither of them had any idea that Victoria's money was actually Sarah's money, and that Sarah had just learned she was. "One of the richest women in America. What happens now?" Sarah asked. "That's up to you," Elena said. "We can file a lawsuit to recover the money immediately. We can also pursue criminal charges against Victoria for fraud and embezzlement. Or, if you prefer, we can try to handle this quietly through negotiations. And if I do nothing, then Victoria continues to live off your money, and you continue to struggle to pay rent on a studio apartment," Elena said. "But Sarah, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money. This is about your legacy, your parents' legacy, and the company they built. Sterling Industries employs thousands of people. The decisions you make will affect a lot of lives." Sarah turned back to Elena. "I need time to think about this." "Of course," Elena said. "But Sarah, I would strongly recommend that you don't tell anyone about this until you decide how you want to proceed. If Victoria finds out that you know who you are, she might try to take steps to protect herself." "Like what?" "Like marrying David quickly or transferring assets offshore or worse," Elena said seriously. $2 billion is a lot of money. Sarah, people have done terrible things for much less." Sarah nodded, feeling overwhelmed. "How long do I have to decide?" "Victoria's wedding is in 2 weeks," Elena said. "If she marries David, it complicates things significantly. I would recommend making a decision within the next few days." An hour later, Sarah found herself walking through Central Park, trying to process what had just happened. This morning, she had been Sarah Mitchell, struggling freelance designer. Sarah opened the wooden box with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of letters, each one carefully sealed and dated. She picked up the first one, dated just 3 months after her birth. "My dearest Sarah," the letter began in her mother's handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means your father and I are no longer with you. But please know that every word I write comes from a heart that loves you more than life itself." Sarah had to stop reading and take a deep breath. These were words from the mother she had never known, written with the knowledge that they might be the only connection they would ever have. She continued reading. "Your father and I built Sterling Industries not just for ourselves, but for you. We wanted to create something that would give you the freedom to be whoever you were meant to be, to help others, to make the world a better place. But more than that, we wanted you to know that you are loved, you are worthy, and you have the strength to overcome any challenge life puts in your way." There were letters for every birthday, every milestone, filled with advice, encouragement, and overwhelming love. Her father had written about business principles and integrity. Her mother had written about kindness, resilience, and the importance of staying true to yourself, got in one letter. Dated for her 25th birthday, her mother had written, "By now, I hope you've learned that your worth isn't determined by what others think of you, but by who you choose to be when faced with adversity. I hope you discovered that true strength comes not from never falling, but from getting back up every time." You do? Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she realized her mother could have been writing about her recent experiences with David and Victoria. "The money we're leaving you is just a tool," another letter read. "What matters is how you use it. We trust you to be wise, to be generous, and to remember that true wealth comes from the relationships you build and the positive impact you have on others' lives." After reading for hours, Sarah understood something profound. Her parents hadn't just left her money. They had left her a roadmap for how to live a meaningful life. 6 months later, Sarah stood before the Sterling Industries employees at the company's annual meeting. The room was packed with people whose lives had been transformed by her leadership, employees who had been rehired, new hires from the expanded community programs, and long-time workers who had watched the company return to its founding principles. "When I took over as CEO," Sarah said, "I promised to honor my parents' vision of a company that succeeds by helping others succeed. Today, I'm proud to announce that we've not only met that goal, we've exceeded it." The applause was thunderous. Sarah had to wait several minutes for it to die down. "Our profits are up 40% from last year, but more importantly, we've created 800 new jobs, expanded our educational scholarship program to serve 500 students annually, and launched community development projects in 12 cities." As Sarah continued her speech, she caught sight of a familiar face in the back of the room. Marcus Williams was standing near the door, watching her with obvious admiration. Over the past 6 months, their professional relationship had evolved into something deeper. Marcus wasn't like David. He didn't see Sarah as a trophy or a stepping stone to a better life. He saw her as an equal, a partner, someone whose mind and heart he genuinely admired. Their conversations were about ideas and values, not just business and money. More importantly, Marcus had known her when she was nobody special in the world's eyes. He had been interested in her work and her character before he knew about her wealth. That made all the difference. After the meeting, Marcus approached her backstage. "That was incredible," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "You've completely transformed this company." "We've transformed it," Sarah corrected. "The partnership with your foundation has been crucial to our success." "Sarah," Marcus said, taking her hands, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "Actually, I think I fell in love with you months ago, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't about the money or the power or any of that." "It's not. It's about who you are, your strength, your compassion, your incredible mind. I love watching you think through problems. I love seeing how you care about people. I love who you are when no one else is watching." Sarah felt her heart racing. "Marcus, I know we've been taking things slow," he said. "I know you've been hurt before, and I never want to rush you into anything, but I need you to know how I feel." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw something she had never seen in David's. Genuine love that had nothing to do with what she could provide and everything to do with who she was. "I love you too," she said quietly. "I think I have for a while." Now, Marcus smiled and kissed her gently. "Good," he said. "Because I was hoping you'd let me take you to dinner tonight to celebrate your success." "Just dinner?" Sarah asked with a smile. "Well, maybe more than dinner," Marcus said, grinning. "We could go dancing afterward. I know you love to dance." Sarah laughed. David had never wanted to go dancing with her. He had always said it was too frivolous, too silly. But Marcus remembered every small thing about her, including her secret love of dancing. "I would love that," she said. 1 year after taking control of Sterling Industries, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. It was from Victoria. "Sarah?" Victoria's voice was subdued, nothing like the arrogant woman Sarah remembered. "I know I don't have the right to call you, but I needed to apologize. Where are you?" Sarah asked. "I'm in Phoenix," Victoria said. "I'm working as a receptionist at a dental office. It's honest work, and it's teaching me things about myself I never knew." Sarah was quiet, surprised by the humility in Victoria's voice. "I know sorry doesn't fix anything," Victoria continued. "I know I can't give you back the years I stole from you or undo the damage I did to the company. But I want you to know that I understand now what I did was wrong. Not just legally wrong, but morally wrong." "What changed?" Sarah asked. "Having to live like a normal person," Victoria said with a bitter laugh. "Having to work for minimum wage. Having to budget for groceries. Having to face the consequences of my actions. I realized that I never actually earned anything in my life. Everything I had was stolen from you." Sarah found herself feeling sympathy for Victoria, which surprised her. "I'm glad you're learning to take care of yourself," Sarah said. "That's important. Sarah, can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Are you happy?" Sarah thought about the question. She was engaged to Marcus now, their wedding planned for the spring. Sterling Industries was thriving and making a real difference in thousands of lives. She had purpose, love, and the satisfaction of honoring her parents' legacy. "Yes," Sarah said. "I'm very happy." "Good," Victoria said, and she sounded like she meant it. "You deserve to be happy. You deserve better than what I did to you, and you definitely deserve better than David." "Speaking of David," Sarah said, "have you heard from him?" "No," Victoria said. "Last I heard, he moved to Seattle and was working for a small marketing firm. I think he's trying to start over, be a better person. I hope he succeeds." "I hope." "You both do," Sarah said, and she meant it. After they hung up, Sarah sat in her office thinking about forgiveness. She had learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what people had done to you. It was about choosing not to let their actions define your future. Victoria and David had both hurt her deeply, but their betrayal had ultimately led her to discover who she really was and what she was capable of. In a strange way, she was grateful for the pain they had caused, because it had forced her to grow into the person she was meant to be. Sarah's wedding to Marcus was everything her first wedding hadn't been, a true celebration of love rather than a performance of expectations. They held it at the Sterling Industries Community Center, with employees, scholarship recipients, and community partners among the guests. "When I first met Sarah," Marcus said in his vows, "I was impressed by her work ethic and her vision for making the world better. But as I got to know her, I fell in love with her heart, her strength, and her incredible capacity for turning pain into purpose." Sarah's vows were equally heartfelt. "Marcus, you saw who I was when I didn't even see it myself. You believed in me when I was still learning to believe in myself. You love me not for what I have, but for who I am, and that makes all the difference." Among the guests was Sarah's mother, who had tears streaming down her face throughout the ceremony. After the service, she pulled Sarah aside. "Your parents will be so proud of you," she said. "Not just because of what you've accomplished, but because of who you've become." "I had good teachers," Sarah said, hugging her mother tightly. "All of them." Also in attendance, to Sarah's surprise, was Elena, who had become more than just a beau and just a lawyer. She had become a friend. "You know," Elena said during the reception, "when I first told you about your inheritance, I wasn't sure how you'd handle it. Some people are destroyed by sudden wealth. Others are corrupted by it. But you've used it exactly the way it was meant to be used." "I had good guidance," Sarah said, "and good examples to follow." As Sarah and Marcus danced their first dance, as husband and wife, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. 2 years ago, she had been struggling to survive after her husband's betrayal. Now she was surrounded by people who genuinely loved and respected her, leading a company that was making a real difference in the world, and married to a man who saw her as his equal and his partner. The song ended, and Marcus whispered in her ear, "Ready for the next adventure, Mrs. Williams?" Sarah smiled. "I'm ready for anything, as long as we're facing it together." 5 years after her wedding, Sarah stood in the boardroom of Sterling Industries, looking at a presentation about the company's latest achievement. They had just been named one of the top employers in the country, and their community development programs have been recognized by the United Nations as a model for corporate social responsibility. The scholarship program has now helped over 2,500 students attend college, Margaret Chin reported. And our job training programs have placed 10,000 people in sustainable employment. What about the new initiative for small business loans? Sarah asked. We've approved 500 loans totaling $50 million, William Harrison replied. The default rate is less than 3%, and we've created an estimated 5,000 new jobs through the businesses we've funded. Sarah nodded, pleased with the progress. This was what her parents had envisioned, a company that succeeded by helping others succeed. After the meeting, Sarah walked to her office to find Marcus waiting for her with a familiar smile and a pile. Small wrapped box. What's this? She asked. Open it and see, he said. Inside the box was a tiny pair of baby shoes. Sarah looked up at Marcus with tears in her eyes. Are you serious? The doctor confirmed it this morning, Marcus said, grinning. We're going to have a baby. Sarah threw her arms around her husband, overwhelmed with joy. After years of David telling her she couldn't have children, after the pain of thinking she might never be a mother, she was finally going to have the family she had always dreamed of. Our child is going to grow up knowing they're loved, Sarah said through her tears. They're going to know their worth isn't determined by what they have, but by who they choose to be. Just like their mother learned, Marcus said, kissing her forehead. That evening, Sarah sat in the nursery she and Marcus had already started planning, reading one of her birth mother's letters. This one was labeled, "For when you become a mother yourself." My dearest Sarah, the letter began, if you're reading this, it means you're about to experience the greatest joy life has to offer. Being a mother will teach you things about love you never knew existed. It will also teach you about strength, sacrifice, and the incredible power of believing in someone completely. The letter went on to give advice about parenting, but also about leadership and legacy. Remember that everything we do echoes through generations, the letter continued. The love you show your child, the values you teach them, the example you set, all this will ripple forward in ways you can't imagine. This is how we change the world. One child, one family, one generation at a time. Sarah placed her hand on her still flat stomach and made a promise to her unborn child and to her parents' memory. She would continue to build the legacy they had started. She would teach her child about integrity, compassion, and the importance of using whatever advantages you have to help others. But most importantly, she would make sure her child always knew they were loved unconditionally for who they were, not for what they could provide or achieve. As Sarah looked out the window at the city lights, she thought about the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She had lost everything and found herself. She had been betrayed and learned to trust again. She had discovered that true wealth wasn't about money. It was about love, purpose, and the positive impact you have on others' lives. The little girl who had been given away as a baby had grown up to reclaim not just her inheritance, but her destiny, and now she was going to pass that legacy on to the next generation. David had been wrong about so many things, but he had been especially wrong about one thing. Sarah wasn't holding anyone back. She was lifting everyone up, starting with herself and extending outward to everyone whose life she touched. And that, Sarah realized, was the most beautiful revenge of all, not destroying the people who had hurt her, but building something so magnificent that their betrayal became irrelevant. In the end, the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was living so well, loving so deeply and contributing so meaningfully to the world that the people who had discarded, you could only watch and wonder at what they had given up. Sarah smiled, placing both hands on her stomach. Tomorrow, she would continue building the future her parents had dreamed of. But tonight, she would simply be grateful for the incredible life she had created from the ashes of her broken heart. Some stories end with revenge, but the best stories end with redemption, love, and the promise of an even better tomorrow. And Sarah's story was just getting started. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that sometimes our greatest heartbreaks lead to our most beautiful victories, then I want you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this one, stories about real people overcoming impossible odds and finding their true strength, these are the stories that matter. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their current struggle isn't their final destination. Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted to discover everything we actually needed. And remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you choose to rise when life knocks you down. Until next time, keep believing in the power of your own story. Because you never know, your greatest comeback might be just around the corner.